Okay, welcome back, everybody. So Gary Fluker and I spent 4 days, hardly left the office. It was wintertime outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we studied the likelihood that a pivot point would get hit. We filled spreadsheets with calculations, including where the pivot point was, and then price action for every day and month and week and year afterwards to see if pivot points got hit. And what do I mean by that? So in order to tell you what I mean by that, I've got to do some drawing on the screen here, and I've got to tell you a couple of concepts. So we're going to go back to using a stock, and we'll just use a stock that we were watching today, Live Person. And we talked earlier when all these lessons began about these pivot points, and we got them on our screen and whatnot. And if we just go back in time, and you can do this on any stock or anything that you want to do. You can go back in time on Apple or any kind of financial instrument you want. And if you go back in time on pretty much any stock and any financial instrument, you will notice that in the month that a pivot is created, price will fall to, rise to, or otherwise touch or hit a pivot point. So I'm going to use the word hit a lot, but I'm also going to use the word touch. And when I use these words, what I'm referring to is price action or a candle reaching to or touching the pivot point, the actual horizontal level. Now, I mean actually touching it. I don't mean like 1 cent away from it and almost touching it. I mean it has to actually hit it. So hit and touch are going to be synonymous. And what you will notice many times is that price action will go exactly to it and bounce off of it. Why does that happen? Well, Gary Fluker and I, when we did our research, we found that across the universe of all financial products, currencies, commodities, futures, forward contracts, stocks, options even, 85% of the time, in most cases, 85% of the time, a pivot point will be touched by price in the month that it is created. Now for days, also weeks, also, but we're talking about monthly pivots here. So remember, we're talking about monthly pivots. So this is the June 2021 pivot point. Right here. The June 2021. It's monthly because I called it the June 2021. So it's automatically a monthly pivot because I used the month in it. You can see here that in the month of June 2021, price started off the month higher than the pivot and then dropped and hit it or touched it. It needed to do that. It has a high likelihood of doing that. It's like a home base. It's almost like, hey, before I can trend upward, I need to drop and hit or touch the monthly pivot point. Why does it do that? Well, because all these floor traders are now trading electronically, and they are drawn to, they will literally open up their platforms or whatever else, and they will push and trade a stock or financial instrument down to or up to the pivot point. That's what they do. It's just how it's built in their mind that it needs to get there. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, in other words. So I'm going to write something on the screen here. Most of the time, a monthly pivot point is hit, which means touched by price, in the month that it is created. Most of the time, a monthly pivot is hit or touched by price in the month that it was created. So what does that mean exactly? What am I saying here? I'm saying that the month of June, the monthly pivot point was at $52.99, and price touched it. In the month of July 2021, the month started off and price touched it. At the beginning of a month, if price is above a pivot, it wants to fall and touch it. It did it again in August of 2021. It started off the month above it, and it dropped to it. And what happened here? In the month of September 2021, started off the month higher, and when it dropped, what did it need to do? It needs to hit its pivot. But then something remarkable happened. In the month of October of 2021, Live Person, LPSN, never touched its monthly pivot point. You can see here, there's no price. Some people sometimes ask me, well, how do you know it wasn't touched by price? You see absolutely no candles and no bars anywhere touching that pivot point. That is a phenomenon known as a missed pivot. Now, it's a missed monthly pivot because we're looking at monthly pivot points. It is a missed monthly pivot point after the month is over. During the month, it is unhit. It hasn't been hit yet. Unhit. So during the month that it was created, all the way to the end of the month, all the way through the month, like to the last day of the month, there was a chance that it was going to jump up and hit this pivot point. All the way until the end of the month, there was a chance. So it was unhit. It was potentially still going to get hit. But then the month was over and it was missed. The next month began, and we would assume, but we wouldn't trade it, we would assume that price is going to hit the monthly pivot for the month of December. Well, guess what happened? It didn't hit that either. And this became a missed pivot also. Why is that important? It's important because a missed pivot needs to get hit. If it wasn't hit during the month that it was created, it needs to be hit later. Why was this getting missed? It's because this stock is terrible. This company is terrible. It was capitulating. It was dropping. Generally speaking, 3 or 4 monthly missed pivots in a row is exceptionally rare, and this missed 4 of them. It never hit this one. You might see this, and there's a reason I tell you it doesn't count. It never got hit. This never got hit. So it went 4 months. It's now February of 2022, and it never got hit. And the very next month, price rises, and the first thing that it does is hit that monthly pivot. What about all of these old ones? Well, there's a statistical likelihood that they will get hit, but you got to factor in how that happens. So the next concept that I want to share with you is to add on to what we've said, most pivots are hit in the month that they are created. Sometimes, though, they're not. And that becomes an unhit pivot during that month and a missed pivot the month after. Why is that important? So you can see here as time goes on, you can see here that price either hits or does not hit them, and it just price goes on and on and on. And if you just look at it month to month, you can see here that price is usually hitting the pivots, but sometimes not. Why do I say all of that? Well, let's say you have a day like today where a stock like LivePerson is jumping upward. Where is it going to go? Where might it go? It wants to go to the missed pivot that is nearest to where it is now. This is a missed pivot from April of 2023. The stock wants to go there. It is attracted to that level. And you can see here, if I draw a horizontal line across price, you can see it tried to get up there, and it still has time today. It can still do it. It can still move up to that level. Let's look at HCTI today. HCTI had a big jump upward today. And let's say we're trading it on a short time frame chart. Well, where is it going? Well, you go back in time and you look. Are there any missed pivot points if we go back in time? And sure enough, there are. Is this a missed pivot? No. It was touched by price right here. I'm going to show you this again. This right here is not a missed pivot point. Why is that? Because price touched it right over here. And I'm going to zoom in on that so you can see it even more clearly. You can see here that this pivot was missed, but then the very next month price jumped up to that level almost exactly and then dropped. So that's no longer missed. It's been hit. What about $8.19? August 2022. Actually, yeah, that was missed. Okay, so if we draw a horizontal line across there, we know that that's a target. We go back in time, that's a hit pivot. And you just keep going back in time and you look at levels. So that's going to give you levels to watch for where price might go to. The missed pivot from August of 2022 on HTCI today was hit. Now, how close was it hit? How exactly was it hit? Almost perfectly. I'm going to move out to the 8-hour chart, maybe even the 12-hour chart to make this a little bit easier to see. You can see here that price jumped up. Get rid of all these other items. You can see that price jumped up, and where did it go? It went to this old missed pivot point. That's a target. If you're in a buy trade on a stock in the morning that's jumping, that's a great place to put a profit target. If you're planning a short trade and there's a missed pivot level above price on those longer term charts, that's a great place to say, hey, let's allow the stock to get up there before we short the stock. You don't have to do it every single time, but it's a good indication that you're going to maybe want to wait. What about FRLN? Well, this isn't a surprise here, friends. When it jumped up today, where did it need to go and where did it want to go? It wanted to go to this old missed pivot point from the month of May 2023, just this year. How do we know it was missed? It was never touched by price in the month that it was created and not after until today. Now, if it continues rising today, where might it go? We look for the next missed pivot point. This one is not missed right here because it was touched the very next month. We may not find another one. Okay, it takes us until $24.89 to find one. That's from February of 2022. Is it likely that that's going to get hit? Not necessarily. That's a long way off. And now's where you got to sort of like use common sense. It's probably not going to get all the way there today. Let's look at something like CXAI from way back when. So CXAI has had a couple wild moves, like this move up to $69 a share one day. Where was it going when that happened? Well, if we zoom out and if we go to like a one-day chart really quickly here, and we look at that from April, right? We ran out of levels. We just ran out of we ran out of places that this could go. There aren't any historical mispivots left. It did have one. It had one at $10.24 that got hit later. But sometimes if it's a recent IPO or whatever, you can't go far enough back on the charts, and so you sometimes will not be able to find a level. Let's look at a stock like Apple. Apple, trending upward, becoming a $3 trillion company, jumped up here and everybody got really excited about it. And at the beginning of July, I remember saying on a webinar or 2 or 10 that Apple probably needed to drop to and hit its monthly pivot for the month of July, which is exactly what it did. And then it's free to just jump up and do whatever it wants to do. Apple has monthly missed pivots below price. It has one from June. It's got one from May or April, and so on. Does that mean that Apple is going to drop? No. It just means that if Apple does begin to crash, those are levels you want to watch. You don't use these to take trades right off the bat. If you do, you'll be jumping the gun. Apple might not be ready to fall to these pivots. So it might not be ready to do that. So keep that in mind as you look at stocks. Tesla, for example. Tesla's got 2 monthly pivots here. One is missed from the month of June, and one is unhit, the current July pivot. If Tesla begins to fall rapidly, the July pivot is a perfect area where it might fall to. So once again, this is how we use them. If we plan a trade on a 5-minute chart on FRLN, for example, and FRLN starts breaking out above pre-market highs, and we've already got our fib profit target levels in place for this, and it starts breaking through those levels, we might go over to the longer term chart and check the monthly pivots and say, where might that be going? And we get that number in mind. Okay. I'm going to stop the lesson here. You can now see that pivots are horizontal levels of support and resistance with a defined start and stopping point. For our purposes, it's the first of the month to the end to the last of the month. That's a monthly pivot point. Those pivots are calculated using the previous month's price. Most pivots are hit during the month that they're created, so most pivots are touched by price. Sometimes, however, a pivot isn't touched by price in the month that it was created and it becomes a missed pivot. FRLN has 2 of those on the screen in front of us. It had a missed pivot down here from the month of June that got hit this morning or yesterday or whatever, and then it had a missed pivot from the month of May, which got hit today. They become targets for price when price is rapidly moving in that direction. They don't create a trade. We don't just open up a chart and say, oh, there's a bunch of pivots. Let's go trade to those pivots. We wait until price is already moving rapidly in the direction of those levels, and then we can use these levels as markers, profit targets, waypoints, stopping points, or whatever else. For short sellers, pivots give us a really nice area to watch out for price to stop, where we might turn around and short a stock. And those examples are numerous, and they're contained in the short selling course and also in the updated short selling lessons for those of you that are members of those services. All right, that's all I've got on pivots. I'm going to follow up finally with a Q&A session in the next lesson.